The views and opinions expressed in The Fact Is with Hollis Grant are those of Hollis Grant and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Droids Canada Network. Droids Canada Network does not take responsibility for any content or position produced by Hollis Grant and his show. Listener discretion is advised.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of The Fact Is. I'm your host, Hollis Grant, and today we're going to be talking about the Sunshine List. Now, we've covered the Sunshine List before on past episodes that you can go back and listen to on droidscanada.com. All of our past episodes are there, but this particular episode, we're really going to take a look at who are the biggest players on the Sunshine List, which company is the highest paid, and who had the biggest increase over last year. Now, the Sunshine List is a list that was set up by the provincial government in Ontario, Canada, to watch over and to list all public sector employees. If you're paid by the government and you made over $100,000, then your name would be published in a list for everyone to see how much you're being paid. Now, this is a great idea, and I think this is one that most countries should implement. This is something that should be implemented on the federal level, all provincial levels. And any democratic society that is paying employees through taxpayer monies should be held accountable to the taxpayer. Complete transparency in a democratic society is something that all governments should strive for. The more open and transparent a government is, the more the citizens trust the system. Now, one of the biggest jumps in the Sunshine List over last year was the Toronto District School Board. Now, everybody can harp on a teacher. Teachers are the first ones to complain. The Toronto District School Board was the first one to say, no, we are not going to have students take off their masks when the provincial government ended the mask mandates. No, we are not going to let the children here take off their mask. We have our own rules and we are here to keep everybody safe. Now you might think that that's a wonderful idea to protect the children. The science says otherwise. But the more that you dive into the Sunshine List and you see the connections, the more you understand. Now you understand why they want you to keep on wearing these masks and have endless lockdown after lockdown, and nobody going to work. Now, to look at the Sunshine List, the Toronto District School Board is the second in the list. The first being the Ontario Power Generation. That is all the people that work in the power plants, run the lines. But I'm going to look at the Toronto District School Board. Now, their total salary for their employees is $1.1 billion. That is $1.1 billion. That is an increase over last year of 63.92%. Now, you would say, well, Toronto is Ontario's largest city. They certainly have a lot of people that live there. They must have a lot of students that go there. Now let's look at the total amount. This is taken from the Toronto District School Board.on.ca. There are approximately 42,000 individuals, and they say, who build a positive learning environment. Now, that's 31,910 permanent and 10,500 temporary staff. That is all. That is all that works for the Toronto District School Board. But yet they command a salary costing taxpayers $1.1 billion, an increase of 63% over last year, 63.92. Let's just say 64% increase. Now, you might say, well, hold on a second. The city of Toronto being one of Canada's largest cities, and Ontario's largest city, certainly the population growth, and there's been a lot more people coming into the city, so that would warrant the increase. Now, the population, 2.3 2.93 million in 2017. We can go back to 2006 where it was only 2.5 million. You can go back to 2001 where it was only 2.4 million people living in the city. So it's not a large increase. But then you could say, hold on a second, but how about all the students that are there? There surely must be a lot of students that are there. Now, currently, in the 583 schools throughout Toronto, there is 247,000 students in the school board. 247,000 people at 583 schools and 130,000 people of lifelong learners in the adult continuing education programs, which commands a complete salary of the taxpayers of $1.1 billion. But that's just education. So let's look at when we talk about government and unions, we can talk about the healthcare system and the unions in the healthcare system. Now, one particular individual we're going to highlight on this particular list, and we'll single out this one individual. A gentleman by the name of Dr. Mustafa Hiriji. He is the regional health expert in the Niagara region in Ontario. Now, Dr. Hiriji also made a statement to say, no, we must maintain the masks, we must keep them on, everyone must still wear them. I know that the provincial doctor said, it's okay, you can take them off, we got to end this mask mandate, but I, as your great healthcare guru, have to instruct you that you must maintain these masks on in the region. Now, of course, this isn't anything that's practiced, but he firmly will sit in his ivory tower and dictate to the peons in the region for them to wear their masks. Now, why does he want you to wear your mask? Well, he clearly wants the pandemic to keep on going because Mr. Dr. Hiriji last year made $457,420.17 last year. So $457,000, almost $500,000. Now that's an increase of 53.98% over last year. He received a 53.98% raise over last year. There is a reason why Dr. Hiriji wants the pandemic to continue, because he is making a buttload of money off of taxpayers. So why would you want this to end? Now, there's other individuals in the Niagara Health System that have made equally as much money and were all hired on last year. You have Johan Villajon, who's made $445,000. We have Satish Chawala, who made $408,000. Derek McNally, $382,000. See, when the healthcare system is making or charging the taxpayer $66 million, $66 million just in wages, you can only wonder, how do you justify and get more money? Now, that's the Niagara Health System. Niagara Health charged the taxpayers $108 million. That is a 115% increase over last year. 115% increase in their wages over last year. Of course, they need the pandemic to be continued on. They need to justify their increasing wages. They're the frontline heroes. They're the saviors of humanity. These are the people that are working around the clock to make sure that you're okay. Well, explain to me how it's reasonable for a grade 4 teacher to be making $148,000. Explain to me how it's reasonable for a nurse to be making $108,000. And how is it reasonable for a doctor that does not see any patients making $500,000. Now that's just one region. There's multiple regions, and we can keep on going forever on this list, looking at the different districts that make up all of Ontario. This could be a 4-hour podcast just diving in to these astronomical increases. We covered on a past episode, again on droidscanada.com, where we looked at how much money that Pfizer and Moderna spent to lobby the Ontario government. We can see how they did that, and we know that the COVID vaccine is the highest grossing vaccine of all time. And what do we have coming out? We have more and more variants that are coming out of the news. They've been hushed up a little bit with the war that's going on in Ukraine. But we hear the rumblings of more and more COVID strains. We have a prime minister that said, we're going to keep on giving out these vaccines. We have a prime minister that says, we're going to keep on buying these vaccines and we're going to keep on giving them. We have a transportation minister that says if you're not vaccinated, you cannot get on a plane and you cannot get on a train. When asked if he was going to repeal those, he did not answer the question. So if you're not vaccinated, you're not traveling in Canada. You cannot travel on a plane or on a train. You can't cross the border, because if you cross the border and come back, you need the $300 to provide a certain test. So it's not going anywhere because these employees are being paid so well, they don't want the gravy train to end. But then you're going to say, hold on a second. Well, this isn't really fair. You're talking about $500,000 salaries, $100,000. This is what the average person is making in Ontario. Well, we have covered this on past episodes on droidscanada.com. But the average income, the average salary in Canada is $54,630. That's the average salary. Now, in Ontario, the average salary just in Ontario, only $52,260. So the average person is making $52,260. Well, we know that that's not necessarily true because there's going to be a lot of people that make well below that because they're working minimum wage jobs. But you have these decision makers that are making $500,000 that are making these decisions and forgetting what it's like to make $15 an hour or to make $40,000 a year or $35,000 a year. So they forget that there's people out there that do struggle. Now, Dr. Hiriji, it didn't matter if he called in sick. It didn't matter if he worked overtime because he could bill for overtime. Most salary employees can't bill for overtime. He could take sick pay. It didn't matter. He's going to get paid no matter what. Where most employers don't give sick days. Will only give maybe 3 to 5 sick days a year. If you're lucky, you might get 10 sick days. But for hourly employees, if you take a sick day, you don't get paid. So to make these decisions to shut down businesses and to shut down people's livelihoods and have servers that do make generally a good wage, although not declaring all their money in tips, but having them sit at home, not being able to work, where someone that's making $500,000 is making these decisions that people can't work. And it's okay for him because he's going to get paid. You tend to forget about the little people. You tend to forget about all these people that are struggling just to get by because you've surrounded yourself with a bunch of people that are feeding off the taxpayer trough and trying to justify their $500,000 wages because they don't want the gravy train to end. Now also too, we have to look at is the increase of unions. We know that the manufacturing industry in Ontario was completely decimated. Auto manufacturers were a big part of Ontario, but a lot of those companies moved, and the reason why that they moved is wages. because it got so incredibly hard to compete when you have these unions demanding more and more money. So Ontario lost General Electric building engines, train engines out in London. They lost that business. You have multiple factories in the city of Welland that was shut down. You have multiple factories that we used to be in Brampton for car manufacturing that have been closed down and shut down. Kitchener is talking about losing the Toyota plant. So there's a lot of places that have slowly been phased out due to manufacturing, which is due to the unions. Now, where did those unions go? We've covered this on a past episode as well. Unions got into government, and you can see the increase cost of doing business with unions in the Sunshine List. Now, it's a smart move by those union people and Jerry Diaz, who's taking some time away to escape some fraud charges, which is quite an interesting story that we may cover on an episode in the near future. But nonetheless, we wish him well as he takes a very convenient time to step away to get some drug rehabilitation in the middle of his fraud charges. But nonetheless, when you have these unions that go into government, well, where can the school board go? They can't close up shop and move down to a different country. They can't go to Mexico. They can't go to Pakistan. They can't go to Indonesia, Madagascar. They have to stay here. They're forced to stay here. So at what point will the economy break where the teachers are paid too much, $148,000 or $108,000 just for a teacher? These are individuals that you can check up as well online at the Sunshine List. More than welcome to take a look, and you can have at it, sunshinelist.ca. You can see your old former teachers perhaps on there making $150,000, $168,000 as well for a high school teacher. Fantastic salaries. But when the average is $52,000, at what point will government become so bloated that the single most indebted sub-sovereign nation, Ontario, when will it break? Now remember, there's only 17 million people in Ontario. We have, in Ontario, a higher debt than California, which has 35 million people. At what point will the system break? And at what will happen to these teachers that are spending well beyond their means when we're talking about housing prices being unaffordable for most Canadians? Well, a teacher could afford these astronomical fees, $1 million for a 4-bedroom home in a very crappy part of town in Brampton, $1.2 million for a house in Brampton that has 4 bedrooms and is in a high crime area because all these houses are now rented out to multiple units. A very transient community. You have teachers that are now become landlords that own multiple homes because, as you can see, their wages are so well that they can afford multiple homes. At what point will things break and they need to cut back because salaries will need to cut back? And what will these teachers do? What will these nurses do? And what will these bureaucrats do? These unelected bureaucrats that are making $500,000 a year off your hard-earned money, what will happen to them? Because these will be the first ones to yell and scream and to complain that they need help and they need more money. Meanwhile, the private sector will sit and grind through making an average of $52,000 in the province of Ontario. I'd like to thank you for tuning in to this edition of The Fact Is. I'm your host, Hollis Grant, and you have yourself a wonderful weekend.
Dan, what happens every Thursday?
That would be DCR Droids Canada Radio.
And what time is it at on Thursday?
That's from 9 till 11 p.m.
Dumb question, where do you find it?
You find that at accessradio.ca.
And what's the best part?
It's free.